Yeah.
Yep.
So all throughout the summer, we heard about the drought in California, and we know that California is getting a bit hotter. But it's not just California; it's the entire world. It's part of the phenomenon we usually call global warming or climate change. But usually in the media, like on news or such, you usually hear about the so-called global warming debate. But the point I want to make here tonight is that there isn't a debate, but that the controversy over anthropogenic or human-caused global warming is entirely a political issue rather than a scientific issue. So I'll be making 2 points. First, that the scientific evidence and the consensus derived from the evidence is undeniably shows that the emissions of carbon dioxide is causing an increase in global surface temperatures, and that the doubt over global warming is entirely fictional, created to make it seem like there might be doubt. So in a 2013 paper by John Cook and others published in the journal Environmental Research Letters, Cook and his colleagues found that 97.1% of climate scientists found that anthropogenic global warming was occurring. So they wrote in their paper that our analysis indicates that the number of papers rejecting the consensus on anthropogenic global warming is a vanishingly small proportion of the published research. In another study in 2013 in the International Journal of Public Opinion Research, 2 professors at George Mason University, Stephen Farnsworth and Robert Leichter, found similar results that 84% of climate scientists were absolutely sure that global warming is human in nature, that another 12% weren't quite sure, and 5% had an absolute no. Then these 2 studies by Cook and his colleagues and Farnsworth and Leichter aren't the only studies that found that global warming is human in nature. There's also studies in the journals Nature, Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, and EOS that found evidence throughout the scientific literature from climate scientists. And it's been known since as early as 1896 when Swedish chemist Svante Arrhenius first noted in his paper to the Royal Academy of Sciences in Sweden that carbon dioxide might have an effect on the Earth's atmosphere. That's a pretty long time ago, 1896. So in general, we see that there's an overwhelming support for anthropogenic global warming among the climate scientists, but there's still doubt. So in 2012, Lewandowski and his colleagues published in the journal Nature that doubt seems to exist among political lines. Typically, the Democrats accept that global warming is human in nature, while the Republicans seem to reject it. And that leads me to my next point, that it's the doubt created over global warming is sort of invented. So in 2010, Dr. Naomi Oreskes, historian of science and professor at UC San Diego, and her co-author Eric Conway, a historian of science also for NASA, published in their 2010 book, Merchants of Doubt, about the so-called tobacco strategy, in which about the strategy that tobacco companies used in like the 60s and 70s to obfuscate the truth that tobacco smoke was harmful to one's health. So basically what the companies did was that they made it seem like there was doubt among scientists that smoking was clearly a bad thing for your health. But obviously we know that's not the case. So Oreskes and Conway, they draw similarities to how global warming is now denied by people today in the way that the tobacco companies denied that smoke was bad for one's health. So in 2007, in the journal Public Opinion Quarterly, 2 researchers, they found that 65% of Americans doubted that global warming was happening. And that's sort of similar in that, because they don't think that scientists are entirely certain that global warming is human in origin. So, in short, my point here is that any claim to say that anthropogenic global warming is not happening is more or less for political is a more or less political issue rather than scientific issue. Thank you.
Yeah.
If I use this chair, if there are no more desks.
You can have this one. Just give me a half second. I'm sorry. Are you standing in the back?
Yes, sir.
Shame on you. I'm sorry. Shame on me. I mean, not you. I'll give it to you in just a second here. All right, Michael, I thought that you had a clear statement of the proposition. I'd like the reference to the earlier experience, talking about the weather that's going on. I do think that that's a little bit problematic, though, the reference to the weather, because both sides suggest that that's not really the best way to tell what's going on with AGW. The contents are previewed, but the phrasing of the secondary points, I think, need to be phrased a little bit more like declarative sentences. You've got a lot of explanations kind of built into the secondary points. Those explanations should be in the supporting argument, but you don't necessarily want to have them as part of the claim. The signpost on the first point was clear. Your transition on the second point was a little bit awkward, and it ends up coming across as if the second claim is Republicans lie, and I'm not exactly sure that that's going to be a winning way to get people to listen to you. If 65% of the population doubts it, that seems to equate that 65% of the population are Republican. I know that that's not the case. So I think that you need to have a more general argument here, and that is that you've got the argument. The argument is that it's raised for political purposes. The doubts about the AGW being legitimate are raised for political issues rather than for scientific issues. But you don't really tell us what the political issues are, except that it's the Republicans. I think there are arguments here about the fossil fuel industry, about changes that might be required being expensive that people are concerned with, and that's why they're raising those doubts. I think that's the way you ought to phrase those sorts of things. There's also, I think, another one of those things where you're not really addressing what any of the particular doubts are that people are raised, so it stays a very generic argument, and as a consequence, I think it leaves you vulnerable to a similar sort of generic argument about alarmism being created as a justification for global warming. And it wouldn't surprise me that we got a counterclaim based on a very similar kind of issue that, like you're presenting. All right, thank you.